The most misleading thing about what happened at Roland Garros isn't that Jannik Sinner cramped, it's that the cramp was constructed. Cerundolo didn't stumble into the biggest upset of 2026. He built the conditions that made Sinner's body fail, and that distinction changes everything about what this result actually means. Before you dismiss this as revisionism, the match data holds. Cerundolo converted 8 of 14 breakpoints he created in the final 3 sets. He landed 14 aces. He saved all 8 breakpoints he faced after the 3rd set began to turn. Those are not the numbers of a man who got lucky. Those are the numbers of a player who was executing. So let's start with what Sinner actually is. Not a player, a system. Sinner's dominance in 2026 was built on one foundational condition: the ability to control the pace of exchange from the center of the court. When he dictates rally rhythm from inside the baseline, loading the cross-court forehand, redirecting off the backhand wing, he controls where every point is played. 6 consecutive Masters 1000 titles, a 30-match winning streak, a 37-3 record coming into Paris. That system, when intact, is essentially invincible. The word essentially is doing enormous work in that sentence. Because here is what was real, not hypothetically, not in a practice set, but on court Philippe Chatrier on May 28th. Cerundolo won 15 consecutive points inside a single 3rd set, while Sinner led 5-1. Then, 18 of the final 20 games in the match, not a momentum swing, a structural override. The tactical crack in Sinner's system is specific. It requires 2 things happening simultaneously. First, extend the rally length bracket beyond 7 exchanges past the zone where Sinner's forehand acceleration creates clean winners. In that bracket, Sinner begins to position slightly behind the baseline to absorb pace. Second, the moment Sinner's feet settle behind the line, redirect the ball wide to his backhand corner with heavy topspin, not flat pace, forcing a slide recovery. Then immediately follow with a short ball or drop shot into the vacated forehand court. The sequence topspin wide to backhand, then drop short to forehand, pulls Sinner's body in opposite directions across the baseline in the Paris heat. You do not need to outplay him, you need to outmove him. And in 91-degree heat, that is not a tactical choice. That is a physiological weapon. This mirrors what happened when Robin Sterling dismantled Rafael Nadal at Roland Garros in 2009, not physically, but mechanically. Sterling identified that Nadal's system required playing behind the baseline to build topspin angles. He stepped inside the court, took the ball early, and denied Nadal the court geometry his game needed. Cerundolo did the inverse. He drove Sinner further behind the baseline with depth and heavy spin, then punished the resulting court position with angles Sinner's compromised movement couldn't recover. Within 2 sets of identifying the pattern, the match was functionally over. And here's what nobody is connecting yet. Cerundolo's left-handed forehand generates a specific topspin trajectory that kicks high and wide to a right-handed opponent's backhand at an angle that's geometrically different from the standard right-hand cross-court exchange Sinner has spent 10,000 hours preparing for. When Cerundolo's forehand lands in the deuce court and kicks towards Sinner's backhand shoulder, it doesn't just push Sinner wide. It forces contact above the strike zone Sinner prefers, shortening his backswing window and reducing pace transfer on the return. That is the shot that initiated the lateral drag pattern. It wasn't stamina that ran Sinner ragged. It was geometry. Watch the moment at 5-4, 0-40 in the 3rd set when Sinner bent over midpoint and called for the medical timeout. His serve velocity had already dropped approximately 15 kilometers per hour from his first set average. His feet, which normally position him neutrally between baseline zones, were planted flat. Unable to pivot, a player does not lose 15 kilometers per hour off his serve because he's nervous. He loses it because his legs have been working against a lateral drag pattern for 60 minutes in extreme heat. Cerundolo read that signal and stepped in closer on return for the final 2 sets, compressing Sinner's reaction time at the precise moment his movement was most compromised. That is not opportunism. That is in match tactical intelligence. Now, here's the honest case against this thesis. Sinner is 6-12 in 5-set matches in his career, a documented fragility in long formats that predates Cerundolo entirely. The Australian Open this year showed a nearly identical cramping episode against Elliot Spizzirri that the roof closure saved him from. Perhaps this result says more about Sinner's physiological vulnerability to heat stress in extended matches than it does about anything Cerundolo executed, but Here's why I still hold the position. A vulnerability only becomes an upset when someone exploits it long enough to activate it. Sinner led 6-3, 6-2, 5-1. Cerundolo had to spend 3 sets building the exact conditions that forced Sinner's body past its threshold. The cramp was the outcome. The lateral drag pattern was the mechanism. Those are not the same story. Now let's zoom out. For 9 consecutive Grand Slams, Sinner and Alcaraz won every major title between them. That streak is now broken, Sinner gone in the second round. Alcaraz absent entirely with a wrist injury. What replaces that duopoly isn't a new dominant player, it's a window, a structural gap in the era where the conditions that made 2 players invincible briefly don't apply. We've seen this window before between Federer's early dominance and Nadal's clay consolidation. A single Roland Garros in 2003 produced an unexpected champion in Juan Carlos Ferrero. The tour doesn't wait for the kings to recover. It moves through the gap. Now imagine this scenario. Wimbledon 2026. Cerundolo has extended his Roland Garros run into a deep narrative arc. He reaches a quarterfinal on grass, which is not fantasy. He won at Eastbourne in 2023 and draws Sinner in the draw. Sinner, with something to prove after Paris. Cerundolo, no longer an unknown. The left-handed forehand now on a faster surface where the kick angle is lower and the lateral drag is harder to execute. Does the tactical crack still hold? Does Sinner's 5-set record haunt him again on a surface where matches rarely go that long? That is the rivalry in formation nobody is labeling yet. The numbers confirm the arc, not just the moment. Cerundolo entered 2026 with a 179-94 career clay record. His first serve win percentage against top 10 players in 2026 climbed to 26% on return 4 points above his season average on slower surfaces. In this Roland Garros fortnight alone, he was reaching 3rd rounds of Grand Slams for the first time in his career. He became the lowest ranked player to defeat a world no. 1 at Roland Garros since 1998, and the lowest ranked player to defeat a world no. 1 from 2 sets down at a Grand Slam since 1973. These are not random improvements. These are the fingerprints of a player entering the phase where physical tools and tactical intelligence converge into consistent results. Roland Garros so, here's my prediction. And I'm being specific. Juan Manuel Cerundolo reaches at least 1 Grand Slam quarterfinal before the end of the 2026 US Open. Not a feeling, not a narrative hope. A documented call grounded in clay record, left-hand geometry advantage, and a demonstrable ability to construct pressure against the best player on earth when conditions allow market down. We opened with a question about whether Sinner cramped or was made to cramp. You now have the mechanism, you have the geometry, you have the historical precedent, and you have the player who executed it, not a giant killer by luck, but a left-handed baseliner who spent 3 sets constructing a heat stress engine out of topspin angles and court positioning. Jannik Sinner will win more Grand Slams. His system is too complete, his season too historic, for one afternoon in Paris to define him. But Cerundolo proved something that matters more than the result. The system has a crack. The crack has a name. And one player on tour now knows exactly how to find it. And if that happens again, remember where you heard it first. Because we don't chase narratives here. We build them from the ground up.